Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Top Recovery Radio. You're listening to us on 100.5 FM, or you're watching us live right here on Facebook. Here I am with my co-host, Mr. Darren Gaylor. Hey, Darren, how's it going?
Good, Giuseppe. Welcome to the show.
Welcome to the
Excited
show.
again.
Excited again. Every Thursday, come to you live. Hundreds of guests. No, hundreds of shows, thousands of guests. There we go. Almost got that the wrong way. We've been on air for 7 years, and we really appreciate everybody that's tuned in, watched us, or heard us either on our live feeds or on the radio, Vancouver Co-op Radio 100.5 FM. A show about addiction and recovery issues and trauma. We try to talk about the many pathways to recovery, because there's lots of them, and we've talked to many people with different ideas, beliefs, philosophies. But hey, Darren, I guess it's fair to say everyone we've talked to definitely has a lot of heart and passion for what they do, and they truly believe in what they're doing, whether it's from ayahuasca to 12-step base to atheist recovery. We've done it all.
Yeah, I feel so lucky to have been able to be a part of so many of these interviews. I mean, just naturally, I've come in with my own biases, and
Yeah.
especially younger in my recovery, it was, it's pretty strict with it, and I mean, my mind's just broadened as a result of doing the show and having so many conversations, and yeah, it's been a lot easier to get along and hear people out, and just have some empathy for other people.
Talk Recovery Radio is usually broadcast from the downtown east side at our studio at Co-op Radio, but the studio is closed right now because of COVID. So we're doing this platform, and so this is a BC-based show, but our topics are from across North America. But we got some new news. Just announced the new Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, Honorable Sheila Malcolmson, has been appointed as the new Minister of Mental Health and Addictions. My friend, who I like to think she was my friend anyway, Judy Darcy, retired, and she was our previous Minister of Mental Health and Addictions. So I've reached out to the Honorable Sheila Malcolmson saying congratulations, and here's a resume of projects I work on, and we had a great relationship with the previous minister's office, and hopefully we can continue that this year because Judy, Honorable Judy Darcy, really supported Recovery Day, and I'm the chair of Recovery Day. And anyway, haven't gotten any response yet, Darren. I guess I'm not on the top of her list.
Yeah, give her some time. Give her some time.
Yeah, it's just she's got her job cut out for her. It's like she's in the middle of a huge hurricane, and all she's got is an umbrella. Like she needs money. She needs a budget. Hopefully she gets a little bit more support. I really feel Judy didn't get the support that she needed when it came to the purse strings. Like she really couldn't do anything. So hopefully this time it changes. Although she has made a statement, and her number one priority, this is her first statement that came out, I think yesterday. Her number one priority is to remove restrictions and make safe supply readily available to everybody, to remove stigma. I hate that word, remove stigma. It's just, I don't know, like maybe give it a day and have a conversation. If you watched our show, like safe supply is here to stay, and some people really need safe supply and they're just not ready to recover. Like I've heard the song, on repeat for a year. But like that's your first statement. Remove all restrictions to safe supply. And it's like, well, who did you talk to see if that's a good idea? So anyway.
Yeah, all I can say is let's just give her a shot. I mean, I couldn't imagine anybody more suited for the role as Judy Darcy when she was in there. But like, yeah, I remember hearing firsthand of the walls that she would hit, and how far she was able to go herself until she, was met with all the political agendas and all that came into play. And yeah.
Sure, her first statement would be like, hey, I'm going to make myself aware of what's happening and talk to some key stakeholders and make a game plan.
Well,
So it's like creating a game plan without actually talking to everybody. So we'll see what happens. Looking forward to meeting with her. So we'll see. But Talk Recovery Radio once again comes to you live every Thursday. Hope you love what we talk about. We've had hundreds of guests and thousands of listeners. We really appreciate all of you. Talk Recovery Radio is powered by New West Recovery, which is made up of Last Door Recovery Center and Westminster House for Women, and Last Door for Youth and Adult Males. And we've been considered the recovery capital of Canada, one of the largest recovery communities. Even during COVID, we got a vibrant community. So check that out, New West Recovery. You can replay all of our shows. Just visit talkrecoveryradio.com. We're on SoundCloud, iTunes, YouTube. Subscribe to all of our channels. And, replay some of our old shows. We do replays every Saturday. And if you're listening to us on the radio, the show's a week behind. Because it takes us a week to upload it. But if you're on our Facebook page, we're live. And if you're on the radio, you can catch us live on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk Recovery Vancouver. Darren, who are we talking recovery with today?
Big topic we've got today. Pretty excited about this. Today we get to talk recovery with Dr. Robert T. Muller. He's trained at Harvard, was on the faculty at the University of Massachusetts, and currently at York University in Toronto. Dr. Muller is a fellow of the International Society for the Study of Trauma and Dissociation for his work on trauma treatment. His newest book, Trauma and the Struggle to Open Up, was awarded the 2019 ISSTD Award for the year's best written work on trauma. Awesome. Also another award-winning bestseller, Trauma and the Avoidant Client. These sound like biographies of myself. Dr. Muller has lectured internationally and has been a keynote speaker at mental health conferences in New Zealand and Canada. Over 25 years in the field and currently in Toronto. Welcome to the show, Dr. Robert T. Muller.
Hi. Nice to be here, Darren.
This is great. I mean, a heavy topic. A man with the experiences you have with trauma and recovering from trauma. Before we get into the book, let's just talk trauma.
Sure.
So a lot of my questions, based a little bit on my own personal experience, and so my first question is: the first time I heard of trauma, like the word in context, in treatment, sexual abuse survivors, child abuse survivors, war veterans, the First Nations peoples, residential school survivors, first responders who have to witness, the tragic aftermath of accidents and whatnot. And as a result, which it makes complete sense, but as a result in my own personal life, I couldn't have experienced trauma. I was not attached to any of these sort of notions. So I sort of went into treatment, with that belief. I experienced zero trauma. Is that the case? Because it's a wide demographic of people seeking treatment or addiction recovery that may think or assume that they cannot compare what they've gone through to some of these stories, and therefore immediately have this belief that there is no trauma to deal with, or there are no deep unresolved issues. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that's really important for people in recovery is not to start getting into the idea of my trauma doesn't count, or my trauma counts less than your trauma counts. There's often a tendency for people to compare and to sort of say, my hurt is worse than your hurt, yours doesn't count. And that just doesn't do anybody any good. There's a feeling, it just ends up people feeling dismissed, gaslit, right? It's, and the problem with trauma is that, yeah, you're right. It's a big word. There's a distinction between stress and trauma. And sure, there are people who experience stress, and it doesn't mean that it's left them traumatized. And even some big events, very, very, huge, highly, highly stressful events that you name it, doesn't necessarily mean the person is left with symptoms or left feeling, or struggling, or struggling in relationships, struggling in their lives. With trauma, what we're talking about is somebody who has experienced a period of overwhelming stress of some kind and is left with things that they're really struggling with and don't really know how to deal with. And in trauma therapy, we help them find a way to deal with it. But it's really important to understand that there is a subjective piece to this. And different people can experience the same stress differently. One person's stress can be another person's trauma. So we have to pay attention to the individual differences. And it's really important with some of my clients who've experienced things like, loss of a job. They may not think that's traumatic, or early retirement, or children moving out of the house. These can be seen as normal events, or miscarriages. I think Meghan Markle, I believe her name is, just wrote an article in the New York Times about her miscarriage. People often dismiss these events as normal life events, don't make a big deal out of it. But some people do absolutely experience these things as traumatic, and it's really important in trauma therapy not to dismiss them.
Right. So, I mean, I'm assuming that, with the spectrum of trauma, from like just severe tragic, experiences to, the other end of just a very stressful experience, that at some point it goes to, helping someone therapeutically through a shift of perspective, simply, and a lot of, cognitive behavior therapies and the one-on-one counseling that we see a lot of is mostly that, just trying to help someone see it in a different light or from a different perspective. But with the deep rooted trauma, I mean, it can't just be shifted so simply. And so, I mean, yeah, this is a huge question, but like what is the beginning of, because you're probably gonna meet someone where they do not want to talk about it. I mean, they've lived so long just with it buried deep. So let's talk about a little bit the purpose or the position of the therapist itself, and what's the beginning? Like, how long do you wait? How long, when do you push and prod to get to that information?
So having said what I said before about individual differences, it does, that's true. And it's also true that some things are harder to recover from than others. And the rule of thumb is that the earlier the trauma happened, the more difficult it is to recover from it. And that's not to say that recovery is not possible, because even with what we call developmental trauma or complex PTSD, people who have traumatic events happen, could be very early in life. A parent or both parents who have psychosis or drug, serious drug abuse problems, or parents who have, tendency toward violence or sexual abuse, can really lead to severe problems. So the earlier the problem is, obviously, the more entrenched it's going to be, and the harder it's going to take, the longer it's going to take in therapy. And so with developmental trauma, early trauma, what we often call complex PTSD, it's going to take longer, and it can much more typical would be a few years of therapy. Now, it doesn't need to be weekly. There are people who I work with, again, who have had early abuse, severe abuse, and I may not necessarily, I might work with them for a few months weekly, and then after that I might work with them for every 3 weeks or even every month. But it does take a few years typically for people like that, someone who's had a much better early life history. And you don't want to minimize this, because I don't want to make it seem like, oh, well, that's not a big deal. It is a big deal, even if you've had a good life history. And let's say you've had a traumatic event like violent crime in your 20s, let's say. So you've had basically a decent life. I mean, pretty decent life by all measures. But then in your early 20s, let's say you're a victim of violent crime, you could have PTSD from that. If you've had a very good base in your earlier life, yes, trauma recovery is going to be faster. And that's just, I think, something that we know from research. And again, it doesn't mean that that's not a big deal. It is. I mean, you can be a victim of violent crime. It can be, you can have post-traumatic symptoms. They can be quite debilitating. But because you've had a stronger base in your life, you have better self-esteem typically, you feel more confidence in yourself. Trauma recovery is going to be a little bit faster. And
Right.
so that's where you see more of the cognitive behavioral therapies really being typically used. And that's where you could see therapy lasting 3-4 months, and the person can make quite a bit of recovery in that period of time.
Now, I mean, that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
I guess, where the confusion or the possibility of not meeting a client's needs is potentially at the assessment point, when nobody's going to bring any traumas up. Like, how do we properly assess someone as far as what they need, if in fact what you're saying that is true? Like, basically everyone experiences some form of trauma on a spectrum, right? So assuming that some very severe, some moderate, some light, I guess I can sort
Sure.
of define
For the
it.
sake of discussion.
Right. What is this appropriate assessment tool or guide to
Yeah.
finding someone's needs without getting into it at that point?
So I don't make the assumption that everybody that has that. I mean, I think some of this depends on how narrowly or broadly you use the definition of the word trauma. And certainly not everybody has PTSD, that's for sure. Everybody has something they've struggled with. Everybody has a thing. Everybody has something that's shameful about their lives. Everybody has something that's embarrassing. Everybody has pain. That is absolutely true. Some people are affected in a way that's debilitating, and some people are affected in ways that are much more mild to moderate, and are able to function very well. And so there's that spectrum. I don't make assumptions when people come into therapy. I will ask them about their current life history, like what's going on recently. I'll ask them about their childhood. I'll ask them about their lives when they were a teenager. I'll ask them about their relationship history. And I'm open to whatever they tell me. The way that I start to get a sense that this person really has what we call trauma in the more, let's say, PTSD sense, the lingering effects of an early experience or an experience from a few years ago, let's say, that was overwhelming and really has had an impact on their life and continues to impact them. The way that I can get a sense that that's really happening. So some people are able to just talk about it directly, and they are. It's amazing. Some people can just come in but most people, that's not the case, exactly as you point out. And what you get are something in the trauma literature, what we talk about are trauma fragments, the idea of trauma fragments. So what's a trauma fragment? It's a piece of a story that is dropped along the way when they're often talking about something else. So you might be, I have an example in my book about a patient, I call him Nicholas, and I talked to him about, I asked him about his, to give me some adjectives to describe his childhood relationship with his mother. And he gave me a few adjectives. One of the adjectives he said was good. It was a good relationship. And I said, okay, now I'd like you to tell me any stories, any memories, any examples of the relationship as good. That was the word he used. And he said, the first thing he said was, well, my mother tried to abort me. Oh, the story's actually cute and funny. You see, she and I became good friends later on. She used to tell me that she used to jump up and down trying to get rid of me. Well, I just thought that was really funny. Can't you just picture that, her jumping up and down? So he tells me that story. Now, this is an interesting story because the story is told as a funny story. It's told as a light story. It's told as, but what's hidden, and the reason I say trauma fragments is because at the end of the day, what's cut off is the underlying pain of knowing that you are unwanted. Now, not all stories have underlying pain. And if this guy actually had a great relationship with his mom, I would say some stories are just plain funny, and it's not a big deal. It has to do with what else comes out about the person's life. And as I found out more and more, I mean, in fact, when he was about 12 years old, his mother actually did abandon the family, and there were all kinds of consequences. And so this cute and funny story isn't so cute and funny when we listen to the context of the person's life as a whole. So the reason this is a trauma fragment is because the pain and the underlying suffering is cut out of consciousness. It's told as if it's a funny story, but what's missing, what's cut out, and that's why it's a fragment of a story. It's an incomplete story. It doesn't actually have, and as we would work together in therapy, and as he got better at actually looking at his life, he would re-examine some of these stories that he would, I mean, this was a guy who would joke around all the time and make light of everything. That was his way of coping, and
Wow.
that's okay. Sometimes people need to joke around as a way of coping.
And awareness
But
that, I remember my own personal experience. One time I was talking to somebody who was in a counselor position, and I was telling a story, and he just stopped me, and he's like, "You're saying the story with a smile on your face." And I never noticed that, and I never consciously knew that. And I had that moment, I was just like, why am I smiling? Like, this isn't even a funny story. And now I notice it in other people, that because I'm in a treatment center, I see new people a lot, and it's like, you, not that you should be crying, you don't want to use the word should, but this is a sad moment, and there's like this sense of pride and kind of just a sense of non-urgency, and the awareness of talking about trauma over the years. You've been, from what I saw, 25 years in this field and so forth. I've just been here for about a little bit over a decade. I've noticed a big shift from like trauma hardly spoken about to almost every day it's being spoken about. And what's your sense over time when there's this idea where I'm traumatized, I can't progress, but then when there's a good-looking girl, or I want to go shopping, or I want to play video games, the trauma goes away. What is going on medically, or what is happening when people are not wanting to progress? And is there people that will say, "Hey, I can't do that, I got trauma"? What is going on there? How can we help that? Like, is it an excuse? Is it really debilitating that they can't progress?
well, it's a really good question. I mean, one of the things, it takes us to like one of the fundamental assumptions of therapy. So I am a therapist. I work with people all the time in this way. One of the assumptions is that people are asked to take responsibility for their lives. And it's interesting with trauma because people have so often felt invalidated, and like people gaslight them, and people minimize their pain and suffering. And it's interesting when you ask someone to take responsibility, are you minimizing? Are you saying, well, it's your fault in a sense? And I really like to distinguish between fault and responsibility. Something can be not your fault. Was it your fault? In this case of Nicholas, was it his fault that he was unwanted? Was it his fault that his mom abandoned no, it wasn't his fault. But if he's going to get out of his, messed up life situation, which he had a lot of difficulties, a lot of strengths as well, but he had a lot of difficulties. It was going to be him who's going to have to do it. And at the end of the day, there really is a taking responsibility for your life assumption that psychotherapy takes. And I think, what's the alternative when people say to me, it's unfair? And I say, yeah, you're right, it's unfair. You better believe it's unfair. I mean, where is it written that life is fair? I mean, life is really unfair. Still, if anybody's going to get you out, it's going to be you. I mean, it's not going to be me. It's not going to be,
That's
right?
such a hot topic
Yeah.
because we try not to make this show about 12-step therapy philosophies, but a lot of the talk is, there's a lot of talk in the for 12-step community. It's like that step 9 phase in your life, taking responsibility, making amends, step 9 to 10 and all that. Some people think that's re-traumatizing, and like how do I forgive some person, place, or thing that may have done something to me that's traumatizing? I mean, that's like such a hot question when it comes to people. The first thing they say is like, I'll never forgive them, 3 days off of heroin. It's like, you're not supposed to, like, wait a minute. Any advice, any tips, in your book on how to through that?
So yeah, the topic of forgiveness is so interesting in its own right. And forgiveness, I'm a fan of forgiveness for many people. I'm very happy to help people find a place of forgiveness. But trauma recovery doesn't require forgiveness. It does require taking responsibility, though. And so, and there is a distinction there. It's subtle, but I'll just briefly that, like I said, it's not your fault. The things that have happened, usually these, whether it's a victim of crime, whether it's a abuse, whether it's your parents were drug addicted and you grew up with that, it's not you didn't ask to be born into that family or to any of these things, right? Not your fault. But if you're going to recover, yeah, taking responsibility is a fundamental piece of it. Does that mean that you have to reach a point of forgiveness? I think in a more spiritual sense, I think there's disagreement about this. And there certainly are people who really think that that is the highest point of recovery. In my book, I say that for many people, there's a sense that they feel obligated to forgive, and then they feel guilty if they don't want to. And so that can be a kind of a pressure on them. And so I say to people, I don't require that you reach a point of forgiveness. And the other thing about forgiveness that I introduce in the book is the idea of forgiveness as a process. There may be some aspects you forgive and some aspects you don't. There may be times in your life where you feel more forgiving and times in your life where you feel less. And if we think of forgiveness as a process, rather than a kind of virtue, a place you arrive at, if we can think of it as having ups and downs, just like everything else, grieving can have ups and downs. Suffering can have ups and downs. Making amends can have ups and downs. All these things can have ups and downs to them. If we think of forgiveness as something that can have its ups and downs, there may be times that we feel more forgiving, and then something else happens. Let's say we then have children, and then we start thinking and say, wow, I know how I feel toward my children. Now I really don't get how my parents could have been that way toward me when I'm this way toward my kids, and you're not feeling so forgiving anymore, where maybe you did before. And that's not a problem. That's just something to be aware of, that these things, if we think of forgiveness as a process, that can actually be very empowering. And I think a lot of people don't realize that it can be. It can have these ups and downs in your life. But I do think taking responsibility is a key ingredient in trauma recovery.
That's so well said. I remember, the work that I've done with men and my job as an addictions counselor. I remember feeling, especially those like dealing with, like you said, childhood abuse, like complete victims, and to even bring up the notion of forgiveness seemed wrong. It seemed ethically just wrong to even give them that plateau as a what you must do in order to get through this. And it just, you speak to so much about just living your life in that sense of, you know, that process of forgiveness, where you're not saying I forgive that person. You're not having to force yourself to believe it, but just allow yourself the process of living a better life, and standing up for, you know, the underdogs, and how that, you know, shift can really become what forgiveness is in a sense. I'm
Right,
really,
right.
really excited that you brought that up. The death is always associated, you know, especially at a younger age, with a trauma. You know, a young guy losing his dad, you know, a sibling. But death is such a part of life. It's hard to say that because death happened, it has to be a traumatic experience, or it has to be that. Is it just being young and that's how we experience things that are beyond our sort of mental capacity that make it traumatic? Like it hits the emotions more than it hits, you know, our mental cognitive, you know, availability to understand it.
Well, I mean, so I think there's a distinction between grieving a loss and traumatic grief that I think is an important distinction to make. And, you know, all deaths, when they were good relationships, especially, but even when they're bad relationships, honestly, people can struggle. And feeling sadness, feeling a sense of profound loss, even for a few months, really should be seen as a normal human process. And we don't want to pathologize something like that. And I think people often want to medicate sadness away. But sadness is not a bad thing. Sadness can actually be a good thing. And psychotherapy doesn't always make you, quote, happier. In some ways, it can make you happier. In some ways, it can make you wiser. In some ways, it can allow you to feel other feelings more acutely. And that can be painful too. So it can make you grow. Traumatic grief happens when there's a loss and there was so much complication around the relationship that you don't know what to feel. And so when I have clients whose children, let's say, died by suicide, and I had one client whose child died by suicide, and he called her and left the mom. I worked with the mom whose child had died. He called mom a couple days before and said, give me a call. She was busy, just a work thing. She had no idea what was going on. And then he dies by suicide. And what got in the way of her grieving was this, as you can imagine, this profound guilt. So she couldn't say goodbye to him because she kept beating herself up. Now, it turns out that her kid had a boatload of problems. I mean, that one telephone call probably wasn't going to change anything. I mean, this kid had been, lots of problems for many years, but her guilt was what really got in the way, and she couldn't allow herself to grieve. But grieving is normal, and we want people to have space to feel sad, and there's a big distinction there.
Yeah, again, we're talking with Dr. Robert T. Muller on the topic of trauma and recovery, trauma and the struggle to open up, from avoidance to recovery and growth. Do you have a theory on why the human condition doesn't want to sit in that natural human emotion of sadness and with a little touch of pain or grief? Like what is it? And it might not be a proven biological idea, but like a theory of like, why do we want to just avoid, distract, subdue? What is a natural process of life? Was this always a human condition? I don't know if your studies went back, generations, but what is it in your ideas?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a great question. There are actually cultural differences in response to sadness and response to loss, and historic differences.
Okay.
And we do seem to live in a time now where we want to medicate away sadness. And this was not, it's hard to remember that this was not always the case. And it's also really important to note that this is not the case in many other parts of the world. People deal with death and loss in different ways. In some cultures, it is absolutely culturally appropriate that the dead person will speak to you. And people will have, what we would call hallucinations. But I think there are a lot of things about life that we don't know. And I don't think that science knows everything. And I think that there is a place for spirituality in trauma recovery, a good place for it. And I don't know if someone who is speaking to a dead relative is actually speaking to a dead relative, or if it's a hallucination. But frankly, it doesn't matter all that much to me whether it is or isn't. What matters is their experience. And if they're connecting either to a part of themselves, or they're connecting to a relationship from their past, or they're connecting in reality to someone who's dead, it doesn't matter. They are connecting in some way, and that's really important. And they may feel very sad in doing so. And you know what? That experience of feeling sad is really growthful to them. Whereas I think this idea that if someone was doing that, we'd give them antipsychotics, or we would think that they're, label them as crazy or this or that or the other thing, is such a mistake, and
This
sort of this
this
idea of
is
they have to be happy.
such a whole other show, because I'm kind of on the same page. We've talked about this on the show before, and somebody had an example where you're in the hospital and you find out your loved one has just died from a tragic incident, and the wife or whoever the loved one that survives starts crying. The first response is, here's something to calm your nerves and calm you down, where it should be, let's all cry together. It's normal to cry and yell and scream and all that, and but we suppress that. And but how do we make this, this happen to you? You're pardon my French, but you're supposed to feel like shit right now. So how do we all feel like shit together to carry you through? But it's the whole idea, is it a disorder, is it an injury? And this is the conversation that really needs to continue. And super excited that we've even touched on that topic as well, because how do you live with PTSD? Like, that's a whole other show.
Giuseppe, I love the way you put it. Let's all feel like shit together. I love that. I think that's beautifully said. I mean, honestly, like, I think can I steal that?
Sure, go right ahead. Yeah.
Like, use it with my clients or with my students.
Yeah.
Students. I mean, honestly, like, no, really, that's really nicely said. And that is really about the connection around sadness and loss that is real and gives people space to be able to express their feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Dr. Muller, your book is focused for therapists, sort of a training guide. What was it, the motivation to get you to write this book? Did you find that there was a lack of understanding in that area, or a lot more mistakes were being made in the rapport building process because it's just a difficult one? Where did the book sort of come from?
So I wrote the book. So the book is written for therapists and for clients. It's actually written for both. So there's a lot of self-help stuff in the book. It's not exclusively a self-help book, but it's written for therapists and clients. And it was a tricky writing exercise for me, because I imagined that I was having a conversation with a group of people who were therapists and clients sitting together in one audience. And that's, sometimes it's a different, so I really stay away from jargon. I really wanted to focus on things people could use. What I felt was that there wasn't a lot out there on how to help people think about the idea of reestablishing safety in their lives when they've recovered from trauma. And the book focuses a lot on the therapy relationship, how what is it that happens in the therapy relationship? If you're a client and you're sort of thinking about, what am I going to go through? The book will really help you think about, what kind of relationship do you have with your therapist? And we're talking about a professional relationship, but a therapy relationship in trauma is a relationship. And the reason that's important is that trauma is a relational injury. When you've been, and that's true even for people who are combat veterans. In the book Haunted by Combat, they talk about, it's a beautiful book, they talk about how the disillusionment in our leadership, that is one of the most painful things. It's a relationship trauma. Yes, going there and seeing things happen and seeing people blow up, absolutely traumatic. But it's not just about that. It's about losing buddies. It's about losing people you love and care about and would fight for and would die for. It's about the leadership feeling disillusioned in them, feeling disillusioned in your country. That's a relationship. And so trauma, and that's true if it's date rape. You trusted a guy and he, what the hell? And you didn't consent. And, it's relationship trauma that's typically where we see the suffering that people have, feelings of abandonment, feelings of betrayal, feeling disillusioned in people that you thought you could trust. And so those things often show themselves in the psychotherapy relationship, where you have expectations and hopes and dreams around how your therapist is going to be with you, and you feel hurt by things the therapist, because you build a kind of relationship when you're working with the therapist. And a good therapist should be able to navigate the relationship and use the relationship. And clients also may wonder, what the heck's going, why am I so mad at my therapist? Why do I feel disappointed? What am I struggling with? Why does it feel like they're acting like my mom, or whatever? And you can come up with your own theories, but the book will help think about how the therapy relationship gets enacted in trauma therapy.
It's so great. It's almost as if the book could help prepare an individual, before going in to see their therapist. I mean, so many come in resistant, like, I know where you're going, I'm not going to let you go there, and surprised or feeling belittled, or, just from that, you know, unconscious, resistant place that they come in, like to have an understanding and almost prepare their willingness for an allowance to the therapist.
Exactly, and that's why I say, I call, the second part of the title is from avoidance to recovery and growth, because it's actually quite normal for people to not want to talk about. And so the idea of, how do you open up when there's something that's a secret that you've carried with you that has been a burden. And very often people carry these secrets, and they've got these little moments in their lives where, I often ask people, this secret, when have you before wanted to tell someone? Oh yeah, my first girlfriend, I did actually tell her. I haven't told my wife though. And it's so interesting, the choices people make, who they told and who they didn't tell. And it's often really interesting why they made the choice. But that idea of telling can feel complicated. You think, okay, it's just going to lift your burden. Well, for some people, it lifts their burden, but it's not just that. It also can make them feel embarrassed and humiliated. So it's really complicated. When we carry around a burden, we carry it around and it's a heavy burden, and it's horrible to have the secret. On the other hand, the idea of sharing is like, oh, that's really shameful. I don't want to tell people that thing about me. So it's really a double-edged sword, and people really struggle with, how do I open up about this? Do I even open up,
It's such a common theme throughout treatment, seeking therapy, years of therapy, money for treatment, and just holding on to that resistance of saying anything, telling that story, truthfully, and taking that opportunity. And I hope our listeners and viewers can just let that sink in. I mean, especially, at this time, is such a great opportunity to read a book like this and sort of get in front of just taking that immediate intervention action of now going to treatment. Is just to sit down and like, just become a little bit willing, question yourself just a little bit, put a little bit of pressure on, to take these risks, because that's what it is.
It is a risk. It is a risk. I like that. It's an emotional risk.
And
Therapy.
sometimes the rewards can be very rewarding.
Yeah.
How do people buy your book?
Oh, Amazon is the easiest way.
Okay.
Just if they go to my author link, Robert T. Muller, Muller, on Amazon, that's the easiest, probably.
And are you taking on new clients, new patients? If somebody really enjoyed what they heard and they're in the Ontario, do you do virtual meeting services as well? Okay.
I do. I'm in Ontario, and I see. I'm licensed in Ontario. I was licensed in Massachusetts, but I've been in Canada for 20 years, and I was like, what am I doing? I'm not going back to the States,
Okay.
at least, especially not at this point in time.
If somebody wanted to connect with you, you have
Yeah.
a website or a Facebook page, or?
For sure, yeah. I have a Psychology Today blog called Talking About Trauma.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so if, you can go.
Right. You've got a blog. Okay.
Yeah. So you can go there and you can find out, like, there's all kinds of, like, every week we publish, like, me and my students, we publish different kinds of things about trauma therapy, and on the let's see. It can be emailed at York University. So, and I'm happy to take emails, rmuller@yorku.ca. I'm happy to give that out, and people can email me.
We'll share that on our Facebook page as well. Really appreciate you being on the show today. Thank you very much. I mean, we'll have to bring you back. Hey, Darren? Yeah, we'll definitely have to bring you back. And we'll take a look at your blogs and come up with some topics, and really appreciate you being on the show. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks so much. I appreciate it too.
Excellent. Thank you.
Bye now.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye now.
Listening to
great first half of the show, Darren. Definitely like talking about trauma and addiction, but I like making sure we talk about recovery, and I love how he talked about responsibility. But we've got a guest that just joined us. Hello, Alexis.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Alexis was on the show just very recently. Recovery Kids.
Drug Kids.
Recovery Kids with the Z.
Recovery Kids with a Z. An amazing fundraiser for this holiday season. Wanted to touch base with you to see how's it going, and if you need more support, this is your moment to talk to us. We communicated this morning.
Yeah.
You've got some great gifts for people that are in treatment right now. And do you need more? How's that all going?
Oh my God, I'm so grateful for the community response that we've been having, even with people who can't necessarily donate toys. They have been coming out. There's a email, like we got some incredible emails from some people who have a couple years clean now, and they've been, they went through the door or Westminster House, and they wanted to sort of share about what their experience was like. And so I'm gonna just read one really quickly, if that's cool with you.
Sure.
So I asked Jazz if I could read this.
For context, because some people might not have heard last week's show.
Yeah.
Alexis started this little thing years ago where, people, everybody needs help. People that are homeless, people that are using drugs, people that are on the streets. A lot of fundraising efforts happen for that population. But then there was this group of people that were in treatment that didn't have money at Christmas, and there wasn't a lot of fundraising opportunities for their kids, and daddy's in rehab, I got no Christmas. So Alexis came up with this idea on getting gifts for these parents that are in a recovery oriented system of care, and that's now exploded. There's maybe a dozen or so bed-based services involved and lots of gifts. And so now that you've done this for a few years, there's people that have been affected by your volunteerism and charity work. And now this is one of those responses.
Yeah, so this is from Jazz. So Jazz writes, hey, my name is Jazz. I'm an alumni door boy. One of my most treasured moments of being at the last door was when we were surprised by an onslaught of Christmas gifts to wrap and send to our kids. I didn't have a dime at the time and was just over 2 months clean and rebuilding a co-parenting relationship with my ex-wife and reconnecting with my then 4-year-old son. Being able to send him presents for Christmas that I had wrapped myself brought warmth to my heart and showed them that I cared and that I was changing my life. I'm almost 26 months clean now, and we all have a beautiful relationship, and I would love to help bring that joy to others. So that's just one of the sort of feedback emails that we've been getting, and it makes me want to cry. You know, that's exactly why we've been doing this. So there are a lot of really good organizations out there that get toys for kids. But the thing is that they need to be in the parent's care. And because they're in treatment, they're technically not in the parent's care at that time. So there is a gap. So what we do is we fill that gap and we get to present toys. We get wish lists for these kids, right? Because you don't know if 13-year-old boy might be into sports, or they might be into computers, or they might be into Xbox, or they might be into, like, who knows, right? And so it's important for us that we provide toys for kid, you know, what they want, and it gives the parents an opportunity to sort of find out what the kids like and to build that relationship with them, and to sort of, you know, make this Christmas a better Christmas. Of course, like the kids and the parents and everyone, we just want you to stay clean, but we want to build new memories around the holidays and sort of normalize the time while the parents are in treatment and away from the family, and sort of help the kids with that, you know, with that bridge and the trauma and that, you know, addiction can have, right? So we do need some more. So we have about 140 kids that we're helping this year, and we have about half covered, which is amazing. But we need more. So things that we are kind of good for is like the 0 to 5 age. We have a lot of stuff for like babies up until 5 years old, but what we're really missing out on is that like 8-year-old boy or the like 10-year-old girl, teenagers. So what we have found that works really well is gift cards work. We have recoverykids.com, and we've posted a wish list on there through Amazon. So you can go onto the Amazon site and see what's on there and see what these kids have wanted. You can also donate by using our PayPal button. You can e-transfer to Recovery Kids with a Z at yahoo.com. Or you can, you know, simply share our post, like us on Facebook, find us on social media. And there's also, you know, ways to help by, we've actually got a lot of businesses that have come on board, which is really exciting, so that it's contactless drop off. So if you see something that a kid likes and you maybe have it because you've bought it maybe for your kids and they didn't want it or something. I know my mom buys gifts all year and stashes it in her closet. Forgets about it. You can drop it off to one of our partners. Open Road Richmond Auto Body, they have 6 locations in the Lower Mainland, and if you drop off at one of their locations, you get entered in to get a gift card to use. So if you ever need it, I hope you don't, but if you ever need it for your car,
you get a new car.
You know, then yeah, they're doing a gift card, and they do tune-ups and all that stuff. So too. So
one of the big things here too is just giving the sense of stress-free. You know, it's hard enough to be in rehab during the holidays, but like not having the ability to, you know, you start to get your feelings back, and it's just like yeah, you feel like oh my God, I can't buy a present for my kid. And everyone says, oh, it's okay. We understand, honey. Everybody says, no, you take care of yourself, honey. Everybody says, it's not about the gifts. It's about, you being well. But the reality is just like, I'm showing up to Christmas dinner and I ain't got nothing in my hand.
Yeah.
And, it's not like you need something in your hand, but this is just a really nice way to help people stay in treatment.
For
Because
sure.
I gotta go make some money, and I gotta go take care of my family. And then sadly, a lot of times when people have that song happening in their head, the reality is they just go to the dope dealer.
And I think like gratitude is an action word too, and like being able to show up for Christmas and being able to stay clean and all those things. But sometimes, our emotions get high and we get like, fixated on that one thing when we're so new clean. Like and it brings back those emotions. If you can't bring your kid a present, it brings up those times that you weren't there for Christmas, or that you went to the gas station to get your gifts before showing up or something, like it can bring those up. And so relieving the stress for these clients is massive, and it allows them to stay at a time when it's really hard to stay in treatment. And it does make it a bit easier for the kids, because I got clean in August. I was around 6 months clean when I for my first Christmas, and it was really hard, and I got help, and I really wanted that Christmas to be really great. And I remember getting help for my first Christmas, and I knew that I didn't have to stress out. So like being able to give them the Xbox game that they want, or the baby doll that they want, or the LOL doll that they want. Oh my God, every girl from 6 to 10 wants LOL dolls right now. So
I'll have to Google that.
It's the weirdest thing. They're these little tiny doll. Anyways, my kids. So, but being able to give them what they want, like that gave me some pride. It gave me, gratitude. It showed me that other people were willing to show up for me, that I was worthy. And I just want to that's the feeling that I want to give these clients that are in treatment, is that they're worthy, that they are, that one day that they might be able to help out too, just like Jazz,
It's a win-win. If even if a client in treatment doesn't hit the heart, maybe they're dealing with a sense of entitlement at the time or something like that. You know what I mean? Like at least the kid through a personal gift is getting a little bit of that attention that he's probably been missing, he or she been missing. And it's just that someone's done something for that little boy or girl, that, and it wasn't just some general or random thing. And it's going to be special, like if anybody can feel like Jag did, to have a little bit of dignity and wrap their own kids' presents when, the government or maybe his parents are paying for treatment. It's just like, can I borrow a few bucks to buy kids? And just somebody's doing it out of the goodness of their heart. I love it. It can only win.
Yeah, it's thanks, Darren. And I mean, it's really is such a beautiful thing. And I couldn't be prouder of the women that have come on the board this year. And we're so excited. We have plans to expand to back to school programs, to sponsoring sports for kids, so that they can participate in art programs or dance programs or sporting or whatever it is, to just help a new person in recovery with their kids, give them what they need,
Brilliant. It's a brilliant idea. Thank you for being on the show, Alexis.
Yeah.
And put in the feeds and Recovery Kids with a Z, .ca.
.com.
Recoverykids with a Z.com. Make your donation there and help out people in early recovery. You're listening to Talk Recovery Radio, powered by New West Recovery, which is made up of Last Door, Westminster House, Canada's recovery community. Shout out to Vancouver Co-op Radio. Thanks for allowing us to talk about recovery for an hour on your show. Darren, always good to see you on a weekly basis.
Always a pleasure.
Okay, perfect. Waiting for that.
Oh,
All right. Thank you, everybody. Alexis, good luck, and we'll see you soon with these gifts. Take care, everybody. Have an awesome week.
bye-bye.
Bye.